I think it's unprecedented what we're seeing today, this Monday. Never before in my lifetime, and certainly in my job as the Sun's royal correspondent, have I seen all 4 senior members of the royal family, the Queen, Charles, William and Harry, come together in one space, Sandringham, the Queen's house in Norfolk, to effectively discuss the future of the royal family. Because make no mistake, this is a seismic day.
It's interesting you mentioned the 4 people that are at the summit today. But what's also interesting is the people who aren't at the summit, and that's obviously Meghan and it's Prince Philip. Why aren't they there?
Well, Philip this morning apparently escaped Sandringham, not by tunnelling out, putting his goggles on and tunnelling out, but he was driven out in a Land Rover, which I did think was interesting because, as you say, you know, he absented himself from the discussions today. And in the past, Philip has been absolutely the head of the royal family. You know, the Queen has done all the kind of monarchical stuff. She's been the head of state. She's done the state openings of Parliament, and you know, through to opening a new version of Waitrose in Poundbury. But it is Philip who did all the domestic stuff in a rare role reversal in terms of their age and the kind of, you know, times that they were brought up in. She did the more male role, he did the more female role, if you will, if we're, you know, in the 21st century, if we can still determine these things like that. And he really was the head of the family. I mean, he was the person who tried to broker peace between Charles and Diana. He wrote Diana had a very good relationship with her, trying to bring her and Charles back together when they were warring. He famously disliked Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, but again, he was very instrumental in how the divorce between Sarah and Andrew was handled. And I think at 98, you know, he stepped back from royal life, from public duties 2 years ago, and I think he just feels that he shouldn't be party to what is going to happen today. Now, just because he left Sandringham today, just because he left doesn't mean to say that he doesn't have any say or doesn't have any influence. You can bet your bottom dollar that he and the Queen will discuss this for a number of hours, because although the Duke of Edinburgh is retired and he lives on Wood Farm, which is not actually the main house in Sandringham, it's within the Sandringham estate, he lives there in kind of retirement, so to speak, but he has moved back into, or at least spending a lot of time in the main house at Sandringham, which is the personal home of the monarch. It's not owned by the state. It was bought by, you know, the Queen's family. It's her personal home, and you can bet that he and the Queen will have discussed this a lot about the future of the family. But it's obvious that he wants to leave it to her and to Charles and William and Harry to try and sort things out. As you say, the other person who isn't there is Meghan. Now, I do think this is really interesting. I knew at the beginning of last week that they left Archie in Canada, which at the time I just thought was extraordinary, and I just couldn't quite. I'll be honest, I couldn't quite understand it. I just didn't. I was like, I mean, I'm a mum of 2 myself. I didn't understand why you wouldn't bring your baby, 8-month-old baby, with you. But of course, events overtook us. And now we know why, because Meghan and Harry only planned for their visit to the UK, to London, to be relatively short, only a couple of days. And both of them were going to go back to Canada, we understand, last Thursday night. That didn't happen. Just Meghan went back, not Harry. And I think that was very sensible of Harry to stay in the UK, because in an ideal world, frankly, Meghan would be here too. I mean, she has just as much skin in the game as Harry, and I think that they feel that they want to be singing from the same hymn sheet because they feel that they've been pushed out. They feel it's very, very sad. They feel they've been pushed out of this country. They feel they've been pushed out of this country by the royal family. They feel that they've been pushed out by the press. And I think it's a really dangerous and worrying time for the royals, because in effect, what Harry and Meghan are saying is that they are saying, we reject the institution. We reject what the British royal family stand for. And when an intrinsic member of the family, when the 6th in line to the throne is saying that, it leaves all of us thinking, well, what do they stand for? If Harry and Meghan have said, you know what, thanks but no thanks, I don't want to be a part of this anymore, why is that? What has gone so badly wrong that would make them feel that way? Now, who knows what's going to happen today? We don't know what's going to happen at the summit. I think it's 4 o'clock roughly on Monday afternoon, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. I think one thing we can know for sure, they will keep their titles, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That was a present from the Queen on their wedding day, 19th of May 2018. The Queen's not going to rescind that. You don't give a gift. You don't give like a housewarming gift. And they go, oh, you know what? 2 years later, I'm going to take back that vase I gave you. No, you can't take back those titles. They will continue to be the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which is why they've made such play, shall we say, of their titles on their new website, on their branding, Sussex Royal. What will be interesting to see is whether they will give up their HRH, because although they will keep their titles whatever, he'll always be Prince Harry, she'll always be Duchess Meghan, they'll always be the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, in the same way that Diana was Princess of Wales, in the same way that Sarah is the Duchess of York. It'll be interesting to see whether they keep their HRH, those royal titles, which for royal geeks like me, are very important because they are absolutely a sign of royal status. But I think to the general world, I don't think people will give a monkeys whether they keep their HRH or not, because they will still be Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan. So if we have to style them as HRH, or if we don't have to style them HRH, I don't think the general population will care. I don't think Harry and Meghan will care. But what I do think people will care about is if they keep that public funding. You know, the Duchy of Cornwall was set up to fund the heirs to the British throne. And if we didn't have a monarchy, that money would be going into the public purse. It would be going straight to the exchequer. And it would be, you know, for want of a populist term, it'd be used to pay for more nurses or more teachers or, you know, more of the things that people like you and I care about, more, you know, social housing or whatever. And if they keep the Duchy of Cornwall funding, and they're not doing royal duties and they're kind of this half in, half out, and they're cashing in and everything else they've been accused of, I think that is really, really dangerous, because then people will start to think, well, what is the royal family for? What is the point of them? Why are we, the British taxpayer, giving them money in the form of the Duchy of Cornwall to support the heir to the British throne, to sell Brand Britain to represent us on UK tours, to try and sort of occupy that space in between the UK government, which is, you know, party political and has very strict rules on how they govern, and, you know, the UK population like you or I, who, you know, frankly are not going to go and, you know, massage, you know, big economic deals post-Brexit. They occupy that sweet spot in between with this soft diplomacy, the royal family. They can do things that others can't. You know, when the UK government asks, because everything is approved by the UK government, I mean, the royals don't decide where they go. The UK government go to them. There's a steering group, and the steering group says, well, we'd like to send William and Kate to press the flesh post-Brexit to Eastern Europe, or we'd like to send Prince Charles to, you know, New Zealand because they need a visit, or we'd like to send Harry to the Caribbean because we want to shore up the Commonwealth. Yeah. There's a steering group that decides. It's not the royals going, you know, hey, fancy a Caribbean bit of time in the sun. Not how it works. Although, as I understand it, Harry wanted to go to South Africa, and they were given South Africa. Part of the reason they were given that was because a lot of work was done behind the scenes, because people knew they were unhappy and they wanted to try and give them what they wanted. Because when you know that important people are unhappy, you try and keep them in the fold, don't you? So I think this is half in, half out hybrid, where they don't have to pay rent on Frogmore, and they potentially don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to pay, and they still get the Duchy of Cornwall funding, but they still perhaps have a Commonwealth role in Canada. But I'm told that they don't actually want to make Canada their base, that they only went there because they were lent a holiday home, which they're not paying for, apparently. That has not been confirmed, but that's what I'm told. And that actually it's Los Angeles that they want to make their home. And I think if that is the case, their argument is a lot more difficult, because, okay, you know, you can go and bolster the crown in Canada because that's a massively important part of the Commonwealth. And I think that Harry and Meghan have a huge global reach and a huge global brand. But if you're not going to live in the Commonwealth, then it would be difficult to argue that you are doing that kind of Commonwealth job, which they have been appointed as, you know, Harry and Meghan are President and Vice President of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust. So there's that kind of half in, half out. There's the option, which I think will not be, you know, but everything has to be put on the table, the option that they continue as they are, and that, you know, they keep doing royal duties and they keep representing, and they do live at Frogmore, and things carry on as they are. But I think Harry and Meghan have made it very clear that things as they are not working for them, and they need to do something different. And I think this is the issue, because this, you know, to sort of preempt your question, how unprecedented is this? This is this is unprecedented. There is no blueprint for this. The only blueprint is Edward VIII, slightly different. He was the king. So, Edward gave up the throne. He completely walked away, but he was never happy. I mean, we read his letters, we read his biographies. He and Wallis stayed together. Duke and Duchess of Windsor lived in Paris. They surrounded themselves with glitzy friends. They had lots of money. But we know that, he wasn't happy. And that's the real conundrum for Harry, I think, for Harry and Meghan, but more so for Harry. When he served in the army, he put Queen and country first. And now effectively, he's turning his back on both.
Let's talk about the rift between Harry and his brother. Now, I know that both of them have put out a joint statement today rebutting some claims that Harry felt that he'd been bullied by Prince William out of the royal family. Can you touch on that, whether you think that that's accurate, whether you do think that Harry would think that he'd been bullied? And where has this rift come from? Is it historic, or is it just coming out now?
Well, I think there's been bad behaviour on both sides. I think where are we now? We're in 2020. I mean, this has been so crazy, Stephen. I kind of have to pinch myself and remind myself what even day it is, let alone what year we're in. At the end of 2018, I was told that Harry and Meghan, who were still living at Kensington Palace at that point, and there'd been my excellent colleague from the Sunday Times, Roy Nika, had broken the story that Harry and Meghan were splitting their households from William and Kate, because they were all within one household at Kensington Palace. And, we were told by courtiers, well, he's married now and it makes sense. They have their own household, but, everything's still the same. Everything's still great. They're still the Fab Four. And then I was told that Harry and Meghan were physically moving out of Kensington Palace and the Queen had given them Frogmore Cottage. And the reason I was told that they were moving to Frogmore Cottage was because Harry and William had fallen out and they hadn't spoken in 6 months and it was Cold War. And at this point, no one knew that. Well, I mean, I think quite a lot of people knew that, but it hadn't been reported. And I wrote the story that they moved to Frogmore Cottage, which then the palace confirmed the next day. Didn't confirm it to me, obviously. I had to go to print without that confirmation. And then a couple of weeks later, I had lunch with Harry and William's then press secretary. And in the story I wrote, I said as a line, that Harry and William had fallen out and that was one of the reasons they were moving. And then a lot of the focus was on Kate and Meghan, which was rubbish, frankly, because actually the falling out wasn't between Kate and Meghan, although perhaps that's more sexy for the girls to be, cat fighting, bitch fighting. Kate and Meghan, I think, were kind of trying to support their husbands. And then a couple of weeks later, I wrote a big article about bad blood brothers. Our amazing subs at The Sun came up with that headline. And I wrote about William and Harry falling out and their rift. And we printed that on the Saturday. And that week, I went out for lunch with Harry and William's press secretary, and I said to him, I was going to write this, I put everything to him. I said that how William, in a sort of fraternal way, had tried to say to Harry, he didn't say, don't marry her. He'd said, are you sure things are moving so quickly? It's really difficult marrying into the royal family. Don't go too quickly. William's a lot more cautious than Harry. They'd fallen out over money. They'd fallen out over positions. Harry had been given these plum positions in the Commonwealth, Queen's Commonwealth Trust by the Queen. William hadn't. But of course, William's going to be king. He doesn't need to be, but he didn't see it like that. So they'd fallen out over money. They'd fallen out over positions. They'd fallen out over a girl. I'm sure we've all got mates who've, they've had a new, especially, my male friends, they've had a new girlfriend. And you all think, ooh, but, no one dares say anything. And then you say something and then they get married and you think, oh my God. And then you're cut out. So William was quite brave in kind of trying to frankly take the paternal role, shall we say, and tried to help Harry, and Harry took it completely the wrong way. Apparently he said something along the lines of, "You trying to wreck this relationship before it's already started." And it wasn't just about Meghan. I don't think their falling out was just about Meghan, but when you say something like that to someone and you mean it in the best possible way, and when your brother then tells his then girlfriend, now wife, there's probably no going back from that. And I don't think William behaved particularly well. I don't think Harry behaved particularly well. And I think there's been arguments and bad blood on either side. And I think when you're having to work together, it's difficult enough when you're a family, and I'm sure people watching this will empathise if they've fallen out with members of their family, and people take different sides. It's absolutely so much worse when you're working together as well. And don't forget that William's heir to the throne. He's always going to get more money. He's always going to get more favourite treatment. He's always going to get preferential treatment. He's always going to be the golden boy. And that must be very difficult for Harry.
So this has been a long time coming.
I think it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming. It's not just about Meghan, and it's unfair that Meghan should get the blame for this.
Do you think that Harry and Meghan have let the Queen down? Do you think she is really upset about this?
I think she's really upset by this. I took someone out for tea. Isn't that so British, Stephen? I took a contact out for tea in December. And they said to me, "Emily, something's coming. Something's coming, something's huge." And I was like, "What? Kate's pregnant? Like Meghan's pregnant? Who cares?" They're like, "No, something's coming." They didn't know what. Annoyingly, they didn't know what. Otherwise, I'd have put it in the paper. But they said something's coming, and the Queen is crushed. The Queen is crushed. She's devastated. I was like, it was a riddle. It was a riddle that I couldn't unravel then. And I think she's devastated. She's 93. Up until 6 months ago, the succession was secured. She had Charles, William and George. Everyone was happy. Everyone was married. Everyone was still together. The royal family was in a golden period and was doing incredibly well, positive headlines, etc., etc. And just 6 months later, all the Epstein stuff, the Prince Andrews had to withdraw from public life. You've got Meghan and Harry, the charming, multicultural, 21st century representatives of the royal family who have a global reach like no other, stepping back and saying, "You know what, that's not for me." Massively damaging to the institution, just as much, I would argue, as Prince Andrew's alleged misdemeanours. And the poor Queen, she's 93. She doesn't need this. And I think that she is very upset. I think she's pragmatic. I don't think she's someone who lets her emotions run away with her. But I think she felt and does feel very upset as a granny.
One last question, just briefly. Do you think this is the beginning of the end?
The beginning of the end for the family, the royal family? It's difficult to know whether it's the beginning of the end, because we're kind of in the heat and fury of the Sandringham summit, and then Meghan did this and Harry said this, and the briefing and the counter briefing, and it's very difficult to know who to trust. It's very difficult to know who's telling the truth. Harry and Meghan feel very paranoid, think that everyone's out to get them. I think the institution is feeling beleaguered and under attack. I don't think this is the beginning of the end, because I think that the institution survives. I think that, you look at the history books, and the British monarchy has survived for, the last couple of thousand years. If we're going to kind of say that, the Battle of Hastings, I don't know where we're going to say the beginning starts. The Battle of Hastings, well, I would say before that, obviously. But, the British monarchy survives. It's not about the individual. It's about the institution.